Wolfpack, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. I am your Capitan for this episode and every episode of Market Watch Mondays. I'm here to guide you through the Dynasty waters to hopefully help you win the championship in 2021, get that bread, but more importantly, build a true dynasty, a lasting and dominant dynasty within your leagues for years to come. And, how do I do that? As you guys know, this is a very strategy-focused show. I want to teach you guys the same processes and the same mental approach that I have to the game so that you guys can do the same things that I do, but like on your own terms, right? You don't have to agree with my ranks. You don't have to agree with my player evaluations, but you can take those same processes, apply it to your own ranks, apply it to your own player evaluations, and hopefully get there at the end of the day. All right, so it's going to be another strategy episode. It's going to be an interesting one, and it really spurred from a lot of the conversations I've had over the week on Twitter with other really smart folks in the industry. And that's where a lot of these episodes come out, right? So I look at what's happening in the market, I look at how people are thinking, and then I apply my own twist to things. But before we talk about that a little bit, I want to really briefly cover, Noah and I just finished recording our new series on NBA Top Shots, where we talk about the NBA moments. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like digitized sports trading card world, right? So, if you go on NBA Top Shots, you can see like the basic capture moments. You can sell them. There's a lot of money to be made, but more importantly, it's really fun. So if you haven't checked out that episode, make sure you go and check that out. Give us some support. Give us some shout out if you liked it. If you didn't like it, let us know what you didn't like and give us some feedback. All right. So before we get into anything else, though, man, y'all know what time it is. Actually, before we get into the intro real quick, actually, you know what? Fuck it. Hit the intro first. All right, so I got some feedback. Like someone tweeted and say they didn't like the intro for the show, and I said, well, I don't give a shit because this is one of my favorite movies. So if you guys don't know what the intro is from, it's actually from The Wolf of Wall Street, the scene where Matthew McConaughey and Jordan Belfort, who's played Leonardo DiCaprio, meet for like the first time for lunch, and like they have this like humming thing, and that theme carries throughout the movie. One of my favorite movies all time. Love the movie, so that's why it's there. And we're a very like financial, like markets investment approach, so it's a fitting theme to the show. Unfortunately, I don't have great skills when it comes to developing like songs and intros, all that stuff. So you're gonna have to make it work, man. That's just what it is. It's here for now. It's here to stay for at least the foreseeable future. It's gonna be what it is. I'm sorry you didn't like it, bro, but that's life, man. You can't always get what you want. All right, so big trade went down, finally getting a little bit of taste into that. So let's cover that really briefly. Matthew Stafford versus Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff, 2022 first, 2023 first, 2021 third, and I think a couple other pieces in there. So, I tweeted out as kind of as a joke, but like, Les Snead is one of the most, I would say, like irresponsible GMs in the league in terms of with his draft capital. Just not only from trading draft capital, because the Rams haven't had a first-round pick since Jared Goff, and they won't have one for another 3 years, but also just like the draft in general. I mean, went out and drafted Cam Akers, who I love, in the second round, but at the end of the day, like you're taking a running back there. And then they went and drafted Van Jefferson in the second round, which is literally lighting draft capital on fire. So I don't know what he's doing, but they have a good team. They think they have a shot at it. And Matthew Stafford is a pretty significant upgrade over Jared Goff, right? So what does that mean in terms of weapons? I think that's good for Robert Woods, good for Cooper Kupp, and good for Cam Akers because the offense is going to be a little bit more humming. Like Jared Goff needed to get his baby hands held by Sean McVay the entire time that he was there. He was not able to really adjust stuff at the line. He has good arm talent, right? He made some beautiful, beautiful throws, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to process stuff mentally, and Matthew Stafford is probably light years ahead of him. He's also years ahead of him, just in terms of age and experience, but also light years ahead of him on that capacity. So I think, if it works out, it could look good, but it's a pretty damn risky move because, it sets up the Lions really well, right? Because they get Jared Goff. A lot of it was a salary dump because Jared Goff has that albatross contract. We talk about how bad running back contracts are. When you give fat contracts to mediocre to like okay quarterbacks, those are just as bad and crippling because they're for way more money for number one, and two, like it's just like impossible to get out of. So yeah, just an albatross of a contract. But the Lions aren't competing, so they don't really care. Huge downgrade for Jared Goff. I mean, I have some Jared Goff shares, you're going to be lucky to get a second-round pick for him now, I think. Now that he's with the Lions, like no protection, no QB, offensive guru whisperer. He's like Matthew Stafford, like his career at the Lions is painful. It's painful. I mean, much like every player's career in the Lions is painful to watch. So, not very good for Jared Goff. Great for Matthew Stafford. I think it's interesting though, because like Lions now have they have the shot if like let's say Matthew Stafford gets injured, he doesn't have the greatest back, right? You're looking at 2 back-to-back years in 2022 and 2023 where the Lions have 2 top 10 picks. So that really sets the future up. Knowing them, they'll probably blow it, because they're not very good at drafting, but they have that draft capital, so who knows what happens. So that's a good side. I think this is good for Cam Akers, right? In terms of like touchdown upside, in terms of that offense being scoring, but Matthew Stafford is not really a dump off guy, and Cam Akers also just hasn't really been that involved in the running game. I mean, Sean McVay, for whatever reason, hasn't involved running backs in the running game in the passing game that much at all. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think TD upside is there. We know Cam Akers is the workhorse, and Matthew Stafford will probably keep the defense a little bit honest in terms of stretching it downfield. I think they're missing a downfield stretcher though, right? Like Cooper Kupp isn't really that. Robert Woods isn't really that. Like they both play in the intermediate to short game, and they're both very good, but they're really missing. I joked about it, but if they add like a Will Fuller to kind of fill that Brandon Cooks role, I think they could really go back to the heydays of the 2018 offense that they had. But we'll see how that plays out. I think it's interesting for Swift because probably more dump offs for him on the Lions side. I was a big fan of Swift and still am. I think he's a great buy candidate to get out there. Maybe people are going to overadjust and be like, wow, the offense sucks now with Jared Goff, which might be true, but I do think Swift is going to kind of take over that backfield going forward. So those are kind of the fantasy implications, I would say. Be on the lookout for all the offseason or free agents moves. We'll have a lot of episodes coming out on that as well on the Bunkbeds channel where we talk a little bit about it. So make sure you stay on the lookout for that. All right. So that's just a brief intro, brief talk about the big news that's happening. A lot of stuff. I'm working on stuff in the background. BDG's working on stuff in the background to get you guys the premium content that you guys need. So follow me on Twitter, man. Stay locked in. Stay tuned in. There's like big stuff coming. I mean, I talked about the guest list that we have. We got JJ Zachariason, we got Graham Barfield, we got Jetpack Galileo, we got DF Bean Counter coming on the pod. I'll probably pull in a couple other guests. I don't like flooding the Market Watch Mondays with a lot of guests because I want to cover the content that I want to cover with you guys, and I feel like there's a lot of strategy and a lot of stuff that I still want to get through. So I don't want to just pull a bunch of guests. I try and limit to maybe 1 a month, maybe 2 a month. So we'll see what happens. But if there's anyone else you guys want to see, let me know. I'm pretty selective because I want people that, 1, bring a very unique lens, and 2, have have good content in front of camera. I don't want to bring a guy that's for better or worse really smart but can't really communicate on camera, because at the end of the day I want you guys to be able to consume the content, and communication is key. So from that perspective, I've been pretty selective in terms of who I'm going to bring on. And I want to make sure they have good audio equipment too, a good mic, a decent mic. They're not freaking talking to you on Apple AirPods where it sounds like they're talking from you underwater. So that's why I've been a little bit selective, and also I just want to limit the number of guests. I don't want this to be an off season where I just have guest after guest after guest after guest. I don't really produce any of my own content. I want to share the content that I produce with you guys. So. And I have a lot of thoughts, man, for better or for worse. I have a lot of thoughts. I can talk a lot, as you can see. And I have a lot of things I want to share with you guys. And I want you guys to become better Dynasty players. So sue me if you don't like it. All right. So this week's topic, the main topic, and the only topic I want to cover is quarterback strategy. How do we deal with it? What does it mean? And it's a great segue from the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff thing, because I tweeted something out earlier this week, and it was something to the lines of this, and you see it on screen. The days of prioritizing QBs in SUPERFLEX Dynasty because of longevity, in quotations, has passed, right? Outside of the top guys, the Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson, all these older, outside of those guys, right, who all basically have first round ADPs or early second round ADPs at worst. There is no one else that has job security. Those young guys and that middle tier of the QBs, to me, they're actually one of the most overvalued asset classes ever. The Carson Wentz's, the Drew Locks, the Darnolds, the Jimmy Grahams, these guys who are still viewed as relatively young and have a long shelf life, they do not have job security, right? So job security and longevity in Dynasty, To me, it's a myth. I mean, I don't believe it. I've never bought into it to begin with. Like, I've always prioritized like running backs because I turn my rosters overs quickly, like year after year. I turn my roster like from my leagues that I started from like 3 years ago. There's maybe like 3 or 4 guys left on a 30-man roster that I drafted. That's how much I turn over guys. So that's why I don't really care about the longevity argument. I'm chasing apexes for running backs, and I had a great discussion today with DTC at DTC_Izzy, I believe is his tag. Izzy, one of the guys over at DTC Trade Calculator. Fantastic guy to follow. If you don't follow him already. Super smart dude. And, we have different approaches to stuff, but I actually really respect his opinion. He's one of the Dynasty OGs. He's been playing like forever, so he's a smart guy. So if you want to trust his advice and follow the more QB centric approach, absolutely go for it. I'm sure he knows exactly what he's talking about. He's had a ton of success. I'm just sharing what my experiences are. In terms of what I go for. So, if we look at like current like DLF ADP, right? Carson Wentz in the 7th round in Superflex, going ahead of Golladay, Robert Woods, Chark, Hawkinson. That to me is obscene, right? Because he does not have job security. And then and later on in the 7th, you have Drew Lock, Taysom Hill, Jimmy Garoppolo going ahead of like guys like Debo and Boyd. And then you have Darnold in the 8th round going ahead of Julio, Fant, Thielen, Fuller. That last bucket is incredibly interesting because like, look, I get it. Darnold's young. But other than that, what else does he have going for him? He has not done anything in his time in the NFL. He's not shown me anything to give me confidence. Whereas, people might say, well, he's young. He's got a lot of longevity. But, like, does he have longevity? Like, if you look at what's happening in the NFL, right? Look at what happened to Jared Goff. Look at what happened to Josh Rosen. Look what happened to Dwayne Haskins. Job security at the QB position, if you're not elite, is no longer present. Guys are getting replaced and scrapped more and more often. The old days of the NFL where you can like wait on guys and there's patience and letting these people develop, like that is no longer the case, right? Like the fans are more active, they're less patient because of social media and all this stuff. The owners are getting less patient because of like ticket sales and whatever, and just having bad teams. And coaches are getting fired left and right. Even GMs are getting like replaced left and right. There's shorter and shorter spans and shorter patience cycles for these quarterbacks. So like just because you drafted someone and they're a rookie and they're still on their rookie contract is no guarantee that they're going to get renewed. Like look at Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, former picks number 1 and former picks number 2. And like, were they bad? Yeah, I mean, like they were below average, right? But like, I think in days past they would have had a much longer leash, but that just doesn't really exist anymore. So I think these young underperforming quarterbacks are probably one of the most overvalued classes of assets within Superflex Dynasty. Like I said, like Carson Wentz going in the 7th round to me is insane, ahead of someone like Kenny Golladay, who you're going to get at least like another 4 or 5 years of production out of, right? And I think, honestly, the arbitrage is like to fade that tier of like young guys that are getting that age premium, which is not really relevant because you're looking for job security, and instead get some skilled positions there and then swing on the older guys like Tom Brady, who people just think are washed and done. Guys in that super old tier where they can actually still produce for you for a few more years. Even if it's 2 or 3 more years or 1 or 2 more years, that's more. 1 or 2 more years at QB1 production, which is what Tom Brady gave you, is much more valuable than maybe like 2 to 3 more years of maybe he has a job from someone like Sam Darnold, and it'll cost you a fraction of the price. So I think that's one big arbitrage opportunity right there. Is like I'm just not going to value these young quarterbacks, guys like Daniel Jones, right? Jared Goff, prime example, just got dumped. And, he goes to Detroit. People think he has a job security there. No. Like, I would not be surprised at all if they just, like, they're picking from the 7th slot and took another swing at a young quarterback, someone like a Trey Lance, if he's still there, and let him develop under a Jared Goff. Like, that is absolutely within reason, right? And all these other guys are looking for quarterbacks. Like, they're going to swing. They're going to move up. They're going to give up draft capital. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, people talk about longevity all the time. And what do you hear? Like, hey, we need to prioritize quarterbacks in Superflex because they last longer than running backs. Because the scarcity value is not an argument, right? To me, a running back is more scarce. A legit workhorse running back that is an impactful player is way more scarce than a quarterback. There's like only like maybe 12 to like 15 running backs you feel comfortable starting. There's about 20 something quarterbacks you can kind of string together and stream stuff on, right? So, and most leagues have to start 2 running backs, and a lot of leagues allow you to start up to 3 running backs, which is why I prioritize running backs in my leagues. I love stacking workhorse running backs, and yeah, do they have a shorter shelf life? Do they have more injury risk? Sure, but I'm playing to win, right? I'm not trying to account for downside of injury risk. I'm just looking for the upside of, if my team stays together, what gives me the greatest chance of hitting? And to me, that's the running back path. So, it's a really interesting discussion, and I'm not saying my way is correct or more correct than another person. I'm just saying that's the way that I play, and that's the way that I found the most success. So, feel free to replicate that, or feel free to ignore that if you want. But, I think I'll go through a couple points, and, Izzy asked me this question, right? He said, why... I was talking about why I prioritize running backs instead of quarterbacks, and he said, why don't you just do the same thing for running backs? Like, secure the longer-term value in terms of QB value insulation, and then flip RBs more frequently, right? So I think that was a great question, and I broke it down into a few points. So here's why I prioritize running backs over a quarterback. Number one, like I said, I think top-end running back supply dries up much, much faster than quarterback. And trading for them, like in my experience, trading for running backs that have more than a 1-year, 2-year shelf life is way more difficult than trading for like a mid-tier QB that you can start, like a Kirk Cousins, for example, right? And you don't want to keep trading for running backs that like bleed out like 1 to 2 years, because like all you're doing is doing rentals. You're eventually going to run out of draft capital, run out of players, and your team is going to be totally fucked. That's not where you want to be, right? So that's one thing. Is like running back supply dries up much faster. Like people bring up the scarcity argument. I don't think that's a correct way to look at it. I don't think that's the right way to look at it, because running back is incredibly, incredibly scarce. Like go into your leagues and try and trade for Jonathan Taylor. Go into your leagues and try and trade for DeAndre Swift. Like these people are not letting go of these assets. Like, Saquon Barkley, CMC, like, you can get older guys like Alvin Kamara, maybe Dalvin Cook. It'll still cost you a fucking arm and a leg, right? So it's not like you can get like some of the cheaper running backs, but they're not adding wins to your team. Their wins above replacement is negligible, right? Like starting an RB2, people always talk about like, hey, like, you can grab an RB2 anywhere, right? But I'm not trying to start RB2s. I'm not trying to start JD McKissick's. I'm not trying to start Tariq Cohen's. I'm not trying to start those guys because, one, their week-to-week volatility is like impossible to predict, right? But two, those guys are going to just fall off. Like they hold 0 to no value. All you have to do is stay healthy to end up there. So I'm looking for weekly points per game advantages. And at the running back position, the workhorse running backs is where you get it, right? So that's one thing of why I do it. Number two, I've historically speaking, I've had way more success identifying good targets for mid-round quarterbacks at value versus running backs in the dead zone. Like running backs in the rounds like 4, 5, 6, 7, like you that is a dead zone that you do not want to touch. There is not much value to be had there at running back position. Most of those are like I said, they're like the older guys that have like maybe 1 or 2 years left. You're looking at like the Leonard Fournettes, the Todd Gurleys, the Melvin Gordons. Like they may look like values, but I promise you at the end of the day, they are not values at all. So I'm fading running backs in that range. And because of the way I draft and not go wide receiver early, I'm usually smashing wide receivers in that range. That's where I'm targeting wide receivers. So I don't want to, so like I have a lot of wide receivers in that range that I target. So I usually trade back into there. I'm smashing wide receivers, and I'm picking out the 1 or 2 guys at quarterback position that like do well for me. So if I think back to, 2 years ago, before Lamar Jackson's MVP season, I was all in on Lamar Jackson. I was all in on Dak Prescott. Those are my 2 of my like mid-round quarterback values, right? And then if I go back to last year, people got a little bit smarter, right? But you still had guys like Ryan Tannehill in that range. You still had guys like Kirk Cousins in that range. Not sexy picks, right? But they get the job done if you have the rest of your roster filled out. So historically speaking, I've always been able to find good starters in that range. And if you follow me, you'll get this type of advice as well throughout the season. So I think, that's another point. It's like it's much easier for me to do and grab quarterbacks that I can start than it is for me to grab running backs in that zone, right? And then the third thing is like consensus is awful at projecting QB seasonal finishes. Like historically speaking, we're just not very good, right? Identifying the top performing QB, identifying the top 3, 4 performing QBs. That's why I've been able to find values in those middle ranges, because guys like Tannehill are not valued the way that they should, because guys like Kirk Cousins are not valued the way that they should. And I think in this year, some of the rookies, not the Trevor Lawrences, but someone like a Trey Lance, I don't think he'll get valued the way that he should. So I think I'm going to continue to target that middle range because consensus, we're not good at projecting where a quarterback finishes at the end of the season. What we are good at doing, and the reason why quarterback streaming has been a viable strategy in the past, is because it's easier to predict their performances week to week. So you can grab a couple of guys like a Derek Carr plus a Kirk Cousins, right? Plus like a Tom Brady, who are all pretty cheap, and you can stream together like a QB1 performance. You cannot do that at the running back position. You're not going to be able to stream together a J.D. McKissick plus like a couple other random running backs to try and manufacture a top 10 running back performance. It's really, really hard to do. But at the quarterback position, you can look at game script, you can look at over-under totals. Like a lot of those things really help you kind of manage that week-to-week flexibility. And even though we're playing Dynasty, it's still a week-to-week game. So, I love having like a couple of solid quarterbacks, right? And in that middle range, like a Ryan Tannehill plus a Kirk Cousins, and then maybe backfilling with like a Derek Carr or a Tom Brady or one of those other guys for super cheap, and I can kind of play the streaming game to kind of manufacture those touches. So that's another thing. Like we're not good at projecting seasonal, but we do have success at managing weekly. So you can kind of stream together, even in Dynasty, streaming together a quarterback. So that's like another point for why I try to prioritize running backs if I'm going for a win now strategy, right? And then lastly, like when it comes to rookie drafts, everyone is always talking about like going quarterback early, right? But when in reality, like when I'm playing a lot of these leagues, what I'm seeing is, yes, the top tier of rookie quarterbacks do go really high. Like, the Kyler Murrays, the Joe Burrows, they'll go like 101, 102, whatever it is, right? But you always have like someone that's hated in the class, right? Last year was Justin Herbert. I hated on him myself, but I still drafted him in the late first. That's where you could get him, right? The year before that, you had, Daniel Jones, and, he's not very good now, but you could grab guys with high draft capital, like top 10 draft capital in the late first. And that tier 2, tier 3 of quarterbacks is something that I think is valuable. And that tier 2, tier 3 of quarterbacks has way more value insulation and way more higher likelihood to contribute to your team than the tier 2, tier 3 of running backs. Like the tier 2, tier 3 running backs is like the Keyshawn Vaughns, right? Guys are reaching up way high to like get a running back after, they miss on the top tier of like the Jonathan Taylors, the DeAndre Swift, the J.K. Dobbins, etc., right? They're reaching now to get that. And in that group, I would much rather go for the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. So, even though in rookie superflex drafts, people always say like, hey, yeah, we need to get quarterbacks early. I think in practice, that's not exactly how it always plays out, right? So those are like the main reasons why I take this approach that I do. I don't value quarterbacks the same way that everyone does, that in taking high-end quarterbacks. Now, how do I adjust that process going forward? Because the one thing I am recognizing is we're getting a little bit smarter, right? We're getting smarter about quarterbacks, right? The Konami code, I've covered it. I've covered it at length, and I have a long thread on my Twitter that actually covers it as well. The Konami code is known more and more, right? And if you just look at it, like the year before last year, when Kyler Murray, no, wait, that was last year, right? Yeah. When Kyler Murray was a rookie, not this previous season, but like the season before that, in Kyler Murray's rookie season, he was probably going around the third round of Superflex startup picks because he was a rookie quarterback, and it was a lot of risk, right? Now, conventional wisdom tells you that Trevor Lawrence is going top 8, top 10, first round, locked. It's dynasty starter pick. Maybe even Justin Fields and Zach Wilson will also go in like the second round or third round, and then Trey Lance will go in like the third or fourth, right? So people are definitely getting smarter. They're willing to take more risks on the rookie young quarterbacks in case that they hit. They're willing to take more risks on the Konami code. So the value in those later rounds is getting more thin because people are getting smarter about where they draft quarterbacks. And that's why I kind of pivoted last year to kind of like, especially in single quarterback leagues even, where I would typically always go for late quarterbacks, I pivoted up and, got guys like Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray, that second tier, because I feel like the edge that they were providing in like the 6th or 7th round of one quarterback leagues was worth it. And I was grabbing more Watson even in Superflex leagues. I feel like it was worth it. So will I adjust my stuff going forward? I think I'll adjust it to a degree, but I'm still not going to go like all hot and heavy, right? Because if you look at the Dynasty ADP, like all the elite guys, the guys that have real value insulation, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, they're all going in the first round now. So you're not going to be able to stack two of them. Whereas like in prior years, you could stack like maybe like a Watson Kyler, right? maybe like a Watson plus like Russell Wilson from the back part. You're not going to be able to do that as often anymore. So I'm not going to reach for that second tier of older quarterbacks. What I'm going to do is still try and get Ryan Tannehill. He's a bit more expensive. He's probably going in the third or fourth round, but I'm still going to try and get him there. And I'm still going to try and get a Kirk Cousins later on in the draft. I think he's a good value. And I think those are going to be the pillars of my quarterback strategy. But I will mix in some early quarterbacks, right? If a Deshaun Watson falls to the mid, late first, I'm going to swing on him. I have a lot of Deshaun Watson last year. I applied the same strategy, right? So that I can anchor to one of those like really, really elite quarterbacks. So I might adjust my strategy that way. But it's a fluid process, right? I still haven't like ironed down my draft strategy this year because I'm studying ADPs and it's still early in the draft. And as I kind of do that, I will share that with you guys. But for now, like I just wanted to cover really just blow up the myth of like QBs, longevity, and like the reason why you should like go QB over running back and all that stuff. Because I don't think it's that informative one. I don't think it's wrong per se, but I think that there's more ways to look at it. I'm trying to provide you the lens that I look at it through. So, make sure you guys just like really, really focus in on your approach. And, the one thing that Izzy did bring up in the conversation that I completely agree with is if you are newer to Dynasty, right? I think that going the QB approach gives you a greater margin for error because you have a longer shelf life. For me, I don't care because, like I said, I'm a volume trader and I'm constantly flipping assets back and forth. So I don't care about the longevity and like the razor thin. It's not even razor thin. Like I have a much smaller margin for error, but I'm comfortable operating within that margin, right? It's similar to what I tweeted about like investments, right? Like think about your risk profile as equivalent to your margin of error, right? If you're not comfortable being risky and being on top of your game and staying on top of all the trades and all the market data and all that stuff, like you should be investing in more long-term assets, right? You should be investing in blue chips, you should be investing in ETFs and stuff like that. You should not be fucking day trading, right? But if you're more comfortable, like I am when it comes to Dynasty and like I feel like I have a good grasp of timing of the market, I have a good grasp of identifying values within the market and within the trends, then like I feel like the strategy that I take gives you much more upside and is a much more play to win game, right? Because if you hit, you're going to hit big. If you hit using the strategy that an approach that I take, the people that go QB early don't have a chance because the point per game differential that you're building on your team by securing some of these workhorse running backs while also backfilling with like very serviceable mid-tier quarterbacks, they're not going to be able to match your upside. Right, like I had a team where I went heavy workhorse running back with exactly that pairing, Tannehill and Kirk Cousins. It's actually Drew's next level Devy league. I lost freaking Saquon Barkley, right? That was my top pick. I lost Saquon Barkley and I lost Austin Eckler, right? And I still won that league because I had Nick Chubb, I had Jonathan Taylor, I had Miles Sanders. Like they were not able to match my weekly upside potential, even though they had elite quarterbacks, because that's one slot. If you have like a CMC that's giving you like 7-point advantage, and then you have another decent quarterback, like that advantage is very, very difficult for anyone to make up because you're sure as hell not getting much advantage from wide receivers. The wide receivers points per game differential is negligible at best, outside of like two guys, right? Outside of like a Devontae Adams and a Stephon Diggs and like a Tyreek Hill, like negligible. Like all those like low end wide receiver ones, the high end wide receiver twos, like they hold value and they're sexy names and they're great to trade and stuff. But when it comes down to the weekly production, you're not getting much of an advantage there, right? So like that's why I think like I take this like risky approach because I understand my risk profile, I understand my strengths, I understand my weaknesses, and I take this approach knowing that yes, I have a much smaller margin for error, but I feel comfortable executing within that range. So similarly, you should do the same. Like take stock on where you think you're at in your dynasty process, where you think you're comfortable, what are your strengths. If you are new to SuperFlex formats, if you're new to the league, then yeah, there's nothing wrong with going a QB centric approach. And I have outlined strategies where that works too, like constricting that supply, making sure you really squeeze the top end quarterbacks when picking from the top and increasing that supply and demand curve for yourself. So I've taken all those approaches too. I've tried all different strategies, but the ones that I found the most success with that I've won in is like, heavily prioritizing running backs and not going too heavy on quarterbacks and really rounding out your skill positions and building a roster that way. So look, I guess the takeaway here, man, is like really, really understand yourself and understand your risk profile and risk tolerance. But also, the takeaway from a fantasy perspective is like really fucking fade that overvalued like youth but stinky QB group. The Drew Locks of the world, the Sam Darnolds of the world, the Daniel Jones of the world, the Carson Wentz's of the world, the Jimmy Graham, the Jimmy Garoppolos of the world, right? All these guys that are like in kind of like very, very iffy situations. Fade them. Like Taysom Hill's. Like, can they hit? Absolutely. I'm not saying they freaking suck and they're never going to hit, but they're very low priority bets, and they do not have the job security. They have perceived job security. They have perceived longevity because they are young and because the team's invested highly in them. But as we've seen over the past few years, draft capital ties, youth ties, all that shit goes out the window because not only are they turning over quarterbacks, but they're turning over front offices, they're turning over coaches. So whatever attachment the coach had, whatever attachment the GM had is no longer there because a new GM's going to come in. And what do GMs do when they come in? They fucking clean house, man. When new coaches come in, they clean house. They want to start their way and build it their way. So it's going to be a refreshed, like clean slate a lot of the time. So that security is not there. So the Sam Darnolds and all those guys, if you can get out for like second round picks, people might view that as selling low. I don't care. I want to re-roll on a second round pick and maybe get a nice wide receiver that will bump up in value. Get a nice De'Ami Brown that maybe increase in value, similar to like a T Higgins, right? And then flip that for like a more aging veteran QB that I need at value, right? Like maybe down the line when like Aaron Rodgers is like 38, 39, he has a couple years left. I'm gonna you can pick up him for super cheap, right? So take advantage of all these inconsistencies and, in my opinion, inefficiencies in the market to just really maximize your edge of winning. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, man. You're trying to win championships. You're trying to build dynasties. And this is the way that I feel is the best way and the way that I found the most success doing it. All right. That's all I got for you this week. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. Follow yours truly on Twitter. Like I said, there's big things coming in the offseason from me, so make sure you guys stick around. It's going to be an exciting time. Big things coming from the Bunkbed Breakdowns channel in general. We're putting out tons of content. We talked about the NBA Top Shots content that we're putting out this week. If you haven't seen it, go over to the channel and check that shit out. It's going to be dope. I had a lot of fun recording it. Noah had a lot of fun just talking about prospects. He knows more about basketball than I could dream of. So it's really interesting to kind of go through that stuff. So, all right, stick with us. Thumbs up if you can. If you didn't like it, drop in the comments and tell me why. I will try my best to improve and satisfy the viewers, because I do care about you guys. Believe it or not, I may be a prick, but I do care about what you guys are saying, and I do care about pleasing you guys, bringing you guys good product, but giving you guys good content. That's what I'm here for. I really do enjoy doing this. It's a hobby for me, but it's a passion. So yeah. I mean, that's all I got for you guys. Wolfpack, I'll see you guys next week on another episode of Market Watch Mondays. Peace.